So, I know I haven't been on here for a while, but I was kind of in a deep, dark place in my life for the last few months, pretty much since I changed careers in November. And don't feel sorry for me. I have learned to endure it, embrace it, come out on the other side wiser, gather myself, and I've realized that I enjoy sharing knowledge with y'all of things that I've learned and kind of retained whilst subjecting you to footage I have gathered over my lifetime, especially footage of me hauling cars. So, I want to share with you um, some things that I learned when I read this book called Boundary Boss. About like a little over a year ago, I had some events happen in my life where I realized that I'm not good at noticing, respecting, or setting boundaries. Um, And so I was talking to my little sister, and she was like, maybe there's a video you can watch or something. So I went onto YouTube and I typed in boundaries, which is where I begin. Usually my quest for new knowledge is on YouTube, probably like anybody else. um, so I typed in boundaries, and right away this interview with Terry Cole on the Lisa Bilyeu podcast came up. And if you are not familiar with Lisa Bilyeu or Tom Bilyeu, they're awesome and great sources of knowledge. They have been for me on my journey of self discovery and self knowledge. But anyway, um, so I watched this interview, or excuse me, I listened to it, and there's a part in it where she's like, um, she tells a story about how in her early 20s she was in therapy and she was telling the therapist about her sister's rough life and abusive guy that she was with. And Terry thought it was her problem to fix. And she was crying and she was saying, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And her therapist was like, excuse me? And then her therapist said, Terry, what makes you think that you know what lessons she needs to learn in this lifetime? And Terry was like, well, I think we can all agree that it shouldn't be with this dumb idiot. And she said, I cannot agree with you because I actually don't know what lessons she needs to learn in this lifetime, and neither do you. Do you know what's really going on for you? And Terry was like, no, like, clue me in, I please. And her therapist said, you've worked really hard to create inner peace for yourself, and your sister's dumpster fire of a life is really messing that up for you. So you want to tie that up in a bow and fix her to make yourself feel internally peaceful. But you can't because you're so codependent with your sister. What's happening to her feels like it's happening to you, but it's not. And then Terry realized in that moment that she was trying to help people and like fix them and play Mother Teresa, but it was really a bid for control because her messed up life, her sister's messed up life, was messing up her peace. And then her therapist said, "Now, from your new perspective, how do you problem solve?" And she was like, I step back until she asks for help and wants to get away from this idiot. And her therapist was like, correct. And so Terry stepped back and she told her sister, hey, I can't listen to you tell me the same horrendous crap every day about this guy. But if you ever want to make a change, I'm still your person. And then, like 9 months later, her sister was like, hey, I'm ready. And then Terry got in her car and she went to her sister and like helped her. And her sister went back to school and got sober and yada, 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 right? But none of those things were because she created, or excuse me, none of those things were because she centered her life in her sister's problem. It was because her sister was ready to change and grow. Her sister was a witch. I'm sorry. That's not part of it. And when So Terry says, when you think about how narcissistic it really is, or self important, to be like, but I really know what you should do. Of course, that's not how Terry was trying to be perceived. Um, but she didn't know she had a choice. She thought she had to tell her sister what to do, and help her sister because she was her sister. But this is what codependency looks like. And the truth about what we're doing and that bid for control really is hard. So Terry is like, "What can you do instead?" And she was like, "Well," so that's when she gets into like these five pillars that she has learned to um, to help with boundaries, right? So she's like awareness, self knowledge, self acceptance, self compassion, and self mastery. She was like, awareness, self awareness. You can't shift what you don't know. So then the next one is self knowledge. Why am I this way? And then self acceptance. I'm this way because, and that's okay. And then self compassion. It's okay. I didn't know any other way at the time, but now I'm going to choose to handle this differently. And then self mastery, practicing doing that, right? So after she tells the story, I'm like, what? What does that have to do with boundaries? Like that whole story about her sister and codependency. Um, and I'm like, what is codependency too? Like, I thought that codependency was relying on someone too much, and that's not what it is at all. But how could I know that, right? I feel like I'm a pretty good judge of the human language, or excuse me, the English language. And so that's what it sounds like, codependency. Turns out, nope. How about no? That's not what codependency is at all. So now I'm hooked, right? I was like, heck yeah, I'm gonna. She wrote a book called Boundary Boss. So I was like, I'm gonna get that. I'm gonna get that boundary book, and I'm gonna listen to it. So now I learned so much from this book, and I want to share the stuff that I learned with you. So right away, she gets into it. A couple of the things that you're not going to be able to avoid if you're going to take this journey to learn boundaries and how to become better with boundaries is you have to make a Zen den and meditating. So a Zen den, she says, is just it's like a quiet place to basically be alone with your thoughts and meditate. And then the other thing that you have to do is meditate. And don't worry, meditating isn't what I used to think that it is. It's actually a lot easier than I ever knew. And, well, let me just explain. So, I used to think that meditation was for enlightened humans, like monks, just sitting there cross legged, chanting Om with your eyes closed. And exactly, that's not exactly it. What? Don't laugh at me. I really thought that it was for enlightened beings that are already amazing and good at it and at some level that I will never attain, so I shouldn't even try. I'm not even gonna start. Just like I'm never gonna be there, so why would I even try? And that is not what meditating is about at all. And if I thought that, then maybe someone out there also thinks that, and maybe I can help you to get started because that's not what it's about. In this case, meditation is actually to help you rewire your brain. Our brain is kind of like a a ski slope, if you will. Um, Say there's a ski slope and it just snowed recently and nobody has skied down that slope. It's fresh, it's clean, um, it's it's just blank, a blank mountain. And as skiers get up to the top and start skiing down the mountain, they start to create grooves in the mountain. The more skiers that go down the mountain, the deeper the grooves will get in the snow. Um, that's kind of like our brain. Our brain is just kind of like a blank canvas when we're born, but as we live and go through experiences, we learn things, and our brain um, starts to fire neurons together in a pattern, like the eating pattern, let's say. As you learn to eat and feed yourself, neurons in your brain are going to fire together, they're going to wire together, and that's going to be your group of neurons that your brain's going to use to feed when you're feeding yourself. Those are all going to fire together. Um, the same goes with learning how to communicate. You're going to have these certain neurons that are going to fire together, wire together for communicating. So imagine that you have all these different grooves in your brain, just like that mountain. They're deeply set. You've been doing it for so long that the grooves are really deep. But that doesn't mean that you can't change those wiring patterns of your neurons. There's another book called The Brain That Changes Itself. And that book goes into detail about how the brain works and how you can change the wiring patterns and how it happens a lot. It just takes practice, right? So in this case, meditation is going to be the practice of rewiring your brain. Um, the practice of helping you to notice your boundary pattern and also to help you learn about the patterns that are currently in place from your upbringing and past experiences and events. Um, this is what the author calls our basement, and I'll explain the basement more in a moment. But another thing meditation helps with is to notice your thoughts and detach from them, because thoughts are constantly popping up in our minds. There was a study, I believe at Stanford, and they found that the average person thinks about 60,000 thoughts a day. And so, if you think about that, we don't control them. We don't control what thoughts we're thinking. If you don't believe me, sit here and try to think what thought you're going to think of next. Like, think of your next three thoughts. You don't know what they're going to be. So, if they're always popping up and we don't control them, what we usually do is we attach ourselves to them. So, one method of meditation is to sit still and focus on the breath, and thoughts will come in, and you just let them drift by, and you become the observer. And you'll start to realize that you don't control what thoughts pop up. They're always running through your mind, and you can now step back and observe those thoughts without attaching to them. Scientists have also found that of the 60,000 thoughts, a large percentage of them can be perceived as negative. So, if you are attaching yourself to all the negative thoughts, you may be perceiving your world very negatively without meaning to. There's another book called The Untethered Soul, and in it, he gives the example I like to call the shitty roommate theory, which is where imagine if you have a roommate and the roommate is very negative all the time. The roommate is telling you that you're ugly and you're stupid and you'll never amount to anything. No one will ever love you. You don't do anything right. You're never going to get anywhere in life. Yada, 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 right? So if you had a roommate that's telling you all these things, you would naturally want to be away from this roommate. You would want to escape from them. You wouldn't want to live with somebody who's like that. And so if you're attaching yourself to your negative thoughts about yourself, then you're your own shitty roommate. Like, don't, the point of his theory is to not put up with the negative thoughts about yourself. Because that's what you're kind of doing. You're putting up with a shitty roommate, but it's your own thoughts. So, that's what we're doing when we allow ourselves to attach to negative thoughts about ourselves. We're putting up with a shitty roommate, which changes our perception of the world. So, meditation helps you come to the present moment, and being present is another key in helping to rewire our brain. Not being stuck in the past or worrying about the future, but allowing yourself to be present. Allowing yourself to have gratitude is important. Being grateful changes your vibration. Like literally, it changes the brain waves, the patterns in your brain. So focusing on the breath, letting go of judgment, giving yourself grace, realizing that no one is perfect. These are all things that meditation is going to help you with. So, speaking of giving yourself grace, the author says that when you go into your basement, which is um, the place where the way you were brought up and your past experiences and events are stored in your brain, you have to give yourself grace and just observe. So it's going to be like um, kind of a journey into your past, and meditation is going to help it not be so scary because avoiding going into our past is what most of us are always doing. Um, so, okay, now the author talks about the basement. Okay, so what is your basement? Your basement is beliefs, experiences, and habits that you learned early in life but had no choice in learning and now shape you. They shape who you are today, but you didn't choose the beliefs and lessons and experiences or habits. Um, that's what it is. It's basically your early life, and there are sometimes things called original injuries or traumas or experiences that we forgot about but cause us to act out today, cause us to be triggered. And so that's what your basement is. So, in order to find out and make a boundary blueprint, you have to go into your basement and find those things from your childhood that you've forgotten all about. And everybody has them. Um, and it is normal to avoid going to the basement, but remember to have compassion for the inner you and your inner child and have patience. Um, the point is not to dwell in the past, but to give yourself grace and learn from your past. Just remember that it's common to avoid the basement. It's normal to resist rehashing past experience. Um, but remember to not blame or shame. Make sure that you're keeping an open mind and giving yourself grace. Um, this is all going to be a learning experience for you. It's a learning experience for you, by you. So, since you didn't choose these things, remember that these life experiences can be influences that are misinformation. You didn't know. You didn't choose them. Some things are not correct. You're going to now make a boundary blueprint. So she says that a boundary blueprint is an instruction manual written by you and read by someone else. In your boundary blueprint, you will learn to transform your limiting habitual thought patterns into empowered, mindful beliefs and actions that you choose this time. So you're going to get rid of all the crap you inherited and then make yourself what you really want. You're going to keep the things that you really want, change the things the way that you want them to be. Just remember to have compassion for inner you and your inner child and have patience. Um, one of the things that is important is to, when you run into something like an original injury, you're going to learn to recognize it. Recognize when your inner child is activated, release your old reaction, and choose a new reaction. This isn't going to happen overnight. It's slow, it's step by step, and these things that trigger us are deeply embedded self sabotaging attitudes and behaviors. So you might feel embarrassed or regretful or ashamed, and that's why it's important to give yourself grace and stay open minded and have compassion for inner you, because these are all things that you didn't know at the time. They're just in there. You didn't have a choice. Um, and now you can choose differently. And so she goes into all of the different things in our childhood that could affect us as we were growing up. Um, so, super important. I really recommend reading the book, but I'm going to skip over the rest of those parts. And then I'm going to go to boundary categories. So, there's different types of boundaries. There's physical, sexual, material, mental, time, and emotional. So, physical is your body. Who has permission to touch you and how? How much personal space? Touch, physical needs, when you want to rest, eat, drink. When do you want hugs and kisses? If you want people to stay out of your room, are you a hugger? Are you a handshaker? Those are all physical boundaries. Um, Sexual boundaries are you decide what level of sexual touch is acceptable, where, when, and with who. You give the consent, you agree, um, and someone should always respect your preferences, desires, and privacy. Material is you decide how others may or may not access your material possessions. Money, car, clothes. Anytime that you may or may want to lend those to friends and relatives, under what circumstances, and how you expect items to be treated. That's material boundaries. Mental boundaries are your thoughts, values, opinions, ideas, curiosities, um, your respectfulness and willing to dialogue. Um, if you shut down or you dismiss, or are you being belittled, or excuse me, are you being shut down, dismissed, or belittled? That is an example of somebody disrespecting your mental boundaries. Time boundary, understanding priorities and setting aside time for them. Emotional boundaries are you are responsible for your feelings, respecting, honoring your feelings, recognize how much emotional energy that you have, respecting ability to take in emotional information. Emotional boundaries prevent you from giving spontaneous criticism, taking things personally. They prevent you from blaming others for how you feel. That's emotional boundaries. And then she says there's three types: rigid, porous, and healthy. So, rigid is you don't ask for help when you need it, you avoid close relationships to avoid rejection. Um, you can be perceived by others as cold, you tend to isolate yourself, you're inflexible, and you immediately exile offenders. You're like, nope, that person did this, and I will never talk to them again. Porous boundaries are you overshare personal information, you say what yes when you want to say no, you overly invest in others' problems, you put up with disrespectful or abusive behavior, you're a pushover, you're too nice. Um, and then healthy boundaries are you value your own thoughts and opinions, you feel comfortable asking for or accepting help, you know when to share personal information and with whom. You can accept and respect the boundaries of others. You're trustworthy, confident, and others feel at ease in your presence. One of the things that she says about having healthy boundaries is that if you say yes when you want to say no to someone, that makes you emotionally untrustworthy. It's it's like deeply rooted into us as humans to recognize when someone isn't speaking their truth or setting a boundary, communicating to you their boundaries. If you look like you want to say no, but you say yes, it's very confusing and it makes you emotionally untrustworthy. One last thing that I think is really important to say before I go is what she describes codependency as. And so codependency is um, overly investing in other people's problems to the detriment of your own health and well-being, and putting other people before your own needs, um, and then seeing people as kind of like a problem to fix. So that's what codependency is, not what I thought it was at all. And turns out I have a big problem with that. I am what you would call a people pleaser. I want to help people. I want to help them stop from hurting. I want to fix every situation that I come across. And so this has really helped me learn that I'm not supposed to do that. And it was mind blowing to me when I realized um, my friend that I would tell my problems to, he would never he would never like offer me advice or whatever, never unsolicited advice. And I couldn't ever understand that, and now I do. And so I've practiced just listening and not um giving people unsolicited advice, because it's actually kind of like rude. I didn't know that. Um so that's just like a little slice of what I learned about codependency. I'm going to stop right there with all the things that I have learned. And this video is already really long. So um, I just, I really wanted to get some of this information out there because it helped me a lot. This book helped me a lot. Like I said, I read it um, for the first time 18 months ago. And so I want you to know I'm 42 years old. It's never too late to learn new things and um, practice um, practice just kind of like rewiring your brain and changing things, because the way that things have been going for me haven't been working, and I really don't want to blow up in anger at people um, anymore, you know? Or as little as humanly possible. Can I please? So anyway, um, thank you for listening if you made it this far. If not, I totally understand, but if you did, just know you're not alone. Um, None of us know a perfect way. We don't know everything, but I'm super interested in these like um, self empowerment, self knowledge um, books and things on the pathway to that, and how our brains work and whatever. So I'm going to post more videos of other books that I've read, because I've read over 50 books in the last 2 years, and um, the ones that I finished, because I didn't always finish them. I wasn't always like, great, this is going to be great. But the ones that I finished, um, most of them I've read again and again, or I'm going to revisit them just so I can tell you guys about them, because um, I liked them. They're super cool, and they have gotten me to where I am today, which I think is so much farther than I was just a couple of years ago. Um, so, yeah, I hope that you enjoyed it, and thanks for listening.